Welcome to Disrupt Leaders. We are in season 2 on our series, which is Disrupt Leaders versus Competing Priorities. And today is part 2, and we're going to talk about managing your people's priorities as a leader. Bill, what's our agenda for today?
A lot to get through. Very, very excited for it. First things first is just in general, how to manage your people's priorities. Make sure they know their core tasks. Make sure they're, cruising along nicely. And then after that, the big thing, what if a new major focus priority comes up from your leader? What should you do? And then eventually, how do you roll that out to your people to make sure that they understand the vision and make sure they're executing whatever that new priority is without letting their old one suffer? So that's what we're getting into today. We've spoken about this previously, but I'd love to know from you from the ground up, what do you do with your people? Like, how have you set yourself up? How have you set your people up to understand the core priorities of their roles and make sure that they're, sailing smooth, I guess?
Went through this last year a little bit when we took over our brand new teams, you and I.
Yes.
We have that first huddle, first meeting with all of them, and really lay out
Yeah.
what our expectations are for them in terms of their core roles, their core responsibilities, right? So you might have targets or KPIs in your business, and you really want
Yeah.
to lay what those are for the year, for the quarter. And so that
Yeah.
gives you an idea of what your kind of day-to-day should look like for them, what they should be priorities. None of that should be a surprise for them, when you
Correct.
come into month 1, month 2, once you kind of had that first meeting with.
Yeah, correct. That's definitely kind of what I did as well, and what I do. I actually do it pretty regularly. I think it's something that I would probably recommend doing, even though in our business, our KPIs haven't changed.
Mm.
For like first week back, first huddle back in the new year, refocus. Okay, just a
Yeah.
reminder, these are the things that we have to aim for. These are the behaviors that we expect. This is the things
Mhm.
that, like, just like simple stuff. Like, for example, in your business, AHT is probably going to be a target, but like, what things did we work on as a team last year to make sure we hit those targets? And how do we make
Mm.
sure we do those things again? And then I also love to just go over like the basic stuff that they should absolutely know. Make sure that you're not taking too long on break or lunch. Make sure that doing all those just like minor stuff, like if you're sick, giving me plenty of notice, that sort of thing. Just
Mm.
completely from the ground up, recontextualize everything that is important to the business. And
Yeah.
you really hit the nail on the head. Nothing should be a surprise. At no point in that meeting should
Mm.
they be going, "Oh, I didn't even know that was a thing."
Yeah.
It's all bread and butter basic stuff. But
Yeah.
I think it's really important to categorize it. I also think it's really important then in your one-on-ones. Now, not every one-on-one do I run through the full scorecard of every single result that the person's got,
Mm.
but I
Mm.
think, again, it's something that's worth doing maybe as a follow-up to that huddle. We spoke
Yeah.
on Monday about all these things. How were you tracking with these things last year, December,
Yeah.
this year, so far? Let's have a quick look. Okay, what do you and I, Julian, what do we need to tighten up on? You know,
Yeah.
I think that's typically how I would manage just the basics.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. I think that's a good plan. I think also it sets what I was talking about before was the rules of engagement, right? They get a sense of you as a leader and then what your expectations are. So it could be an example that you used
Mhm.
just before was, calling in sick, for example, right?
Mhm.
And you might think, some leaders like people to call in, some people like to text messages fine, whatever that might mean for you. You
Yeah,
want to then give them a sense of what the rules of engagement are, what's okay, what's not okay,
yeah.
in terms of your leadership. And then that way, you know, what happens sometimes is if they're not following your expectations, everything then suddenly becomes a priority. You know what I mean? Like everything becomes an issue
Correct.
that you need to follow up on urgently. I need to get to this. I need to let them know this really quickly. And then, it just becomes you're
Mhm.
constantly chasing your tail. So please set
Correct.
expectations or understand their expectations
100%.
straight away.
Yeah. And I think how you can generally know that it's time to have that conversation again doesn't have to be once every quarter. I don't know about you, Jules. I feel like working with teams that kind of goes through cycles, you just start to
Mm,
notice a few things start to slip. There'll just be
correct.
one or two things, like people will just start logging in late in the morning, and it'll be 1 or 2 minutes, but it'll only be once, and then it'll happen a couple of times, and a few people will be doing it, and then you just start
Mm,
to notice it's starting to like just pick up enough that you
build
you
up.
you go, this is not a
Mm,
once off, right? Because people are late sometimes. It's fine, like it happens. We're all human. But when it starts to happen a lot, you start to go, that's actually 3 times in the last fortnight. That's a lot.
yeah,
And I think
correct.
that's when you know that signal. It's like, all right, it's time. I call it a naughty boy huddle. Not that all the people in my team are boys, but it's for naughty boys and naughty girls. Like, we're going to sit down, we're going to have that conversation, and just going
Yeah.
to I'm noticing this, knock on the head before I have to knock on the head, and just have that conversation. I think just be frank. I don't think you should ever dance around the expectations. Just be very clear. It's a core part of their role, and they know that they should be doing it. They should know better than that by now, I think.
I think
Yeah.
I think to touch on that point a little bit as well. I mean, to extend on it, last thing on the expectations front is set expectations that feedback is a common thing in your team. I think if you
Yes.
don't set that expectation, you're setting yourself up for failure, because when they do get feedback like, oh, what's this? Or they might get offended about things that are quite little and minuscule. Whereas if you go, hey, I'm the kind of leader that likes to send feedback, throughout the day, throughout the week. So it's fine, right? Like sometimes, like right now, sometimes I go through a client interaction or something and I'll screenshot it and be like, hey, can you tell me what are 2 things you did really well? And what was 1 thing you would improve if you had the chance to on this interaction? And I might just send it to them on messaging so that I can do on-the-go coaching as well. Like I don't have to wait for my next one-on-one. And it keeps things fresh for them and make sure that, hey, Jules is also looking at stuff throughout the day, right? So I've set that expectation with all my guys so none of them react badly to it, because they're like, oh, what's this? Whereas a couple of other leaders that I've been speaking to, sometimes they'll be like, oh, I need to wait for my coaching session to do that, right? And I'm like, yeah, okay, but you only have so long sometimes. How many things are you going to talk about, dude?
Dude, I remember when we took over our new teams, and this was back like October time. I told my team, I was like, hey, just so you know, I do this. Like I'll look at chats, I'll be passing on feedback. Like when I read them, when I listen to calls, you're going to know about it. And the first couple, like even I was just like, I tried this was amazing. And they're like, okay, and why are we reaching out about this? And I was like, I told you I'd provide you feedback. Like feedback doesn't mean you're getting in trouble. It means you're getting feedback. And the feedback is you're a rock star, keep being a rock star.
You know? Correct.
Now, I think, to be honest, that's as far as you need to go with bread and butter stuff. It is as simple as just actually sit down, have that conversation, set the expectations, and then if people don't align to the expectations, pull them up on it. Like it's not rocket science stuff. It's something that every leader should do. Where it does get tricky is when the organization, the powers that be, the shareholders, whoever it is that makes all the decisions, for some reason, a thing becomes important for whatever reason. So it could be a good one that I know from a few previous places I've worked at. Maybe a few people haven't done their like online learnings and stuff like that. And it's actually a compliance issue that the business could be in a lot of trouble if they take interactions, if they've not signed off on all the relevant, like, regulatory changes, things like that, right? So then all of a sudden doing your online learnings becomes like the biggest focus on the planet for the next month, 2 months, 6 months, 10 months, whatever it is. How do you balance that? I think that's the biggest challenge, because the base bread and butter stuff's easy. So Jules, let's say something like that comes in. It's like a huge new expectation. It's the flavor of the month, maybe. What do you do? How do you handle it? How do you roll it out to people?
I think the first key to that is making sure your people understand where that messaging is coming from. So, if you say that's coming from senior leadership or it's coming from quite some senior as well, they can sometimes understand, hey, it is a little bit of a competing priority what I'm doing in terms of my core role and responsibilities, but because it's coming from this quite senior person, that adds the element of importance to it as well.
Correct.
I think being really clear that if we are the team to take this on and smash it out and not be on the naughty list, that gives us some kind of pats on the back, right? They go, oh, look at Bill's team, look at Julie's team. They have absolutely demolished this priority that we're looking at. And that's going to put you in, everyone's good books, right? You don't want to be the team that's known for dragging their heels or, going against business expectations. You want to be the team that just takes everything in their stride. And that sometimes looks like it's seamless, but it's hard, right? And I think being really clear that, yes, this is going to be a competing priority. What do you guys need to make sure that this is a success? So I think that conversation this is coming from a senior leadership perspective. What can get in the way? I think have that conversation. What can get in the way? And they might say, I don't have enough time to do this, or I've got to do X, Y, Z. And you have that leader that we spoke about last episode, of having that conversation with your leader around, here are my 5 or 6 things. Then you become that person now that prioritizes things for them, right?
Yeah, correct. Now, for me, I think that the big thing that I do first is make sure that I really understand the why behind the change. I think it's really difficult to roll that out and have that conversation if you don't understand what the business is trying to achieve and trying to achieve it. Like the My Learning online learning thing, I think that just makes perfect sense when you go, hey, the business just got slapped on the wrist because people weren't doing their online learning. So do you fucking online learning? I think it's very easy to roll that out. But sometimes the reason isn't as obvious to us as that. Like more often than not, to be honest, we're a business. The reason is money, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like it is what it is. Like I always think of that Mr. Krabs being like money. Like it is. But I think usually like there's something that's driving a lot of these changes, and we don't always see the vision. Like I don't sit there and hear the change every time and go, oh, that makes a lot of sense to me. And so I think it's really, really important to first understand the change itself, why we're making that change. And then before you have the conversation with your people, try to like preempt what you think the impacts are going to be, what the negative things, like you probably know what people are going to complain about. most businesses are making people return back to office more days, right? Like that's a pretty common thing across every business, every industry. When that gets rolled out, understanding the why behind that isn't, to me, crystal clear. Like I don't think it makes any difference personally, but obviously someone does think there's a difference. I think understanding what that is, and then knowing the impact that it's going to have to your people, they're going to have to spend more on transport, they're going to have to do this. I think it just makes it, when you go in to have that conversation, it's a lot easier to roll it out because you can already think about how you're going to handle all those objections.
Yeah,
What do you
yeah, 100%. No, I think you're right on the money. So yeah, I think if we would take anything away from that part, it's really understanding, why this is an important priority, the why behind it, which is Bill has nailed that
Correct.
completely. And then also where it's coming from, the why and the where is it coming from, right? And then how is it going to affect your people throughout the week, throughout the day? I think if you can smash those three things out, you are well on your way to be an absolute legend when it comes to competing priorities.
I think so.
So yeah, and then we kind of move on to like I think one thing I want to spend down a little bit, right, is how do we remove those barriers? We just spoke about how it's going to affect our people, Bill, and I think we want to have a chat about how do we remove those barriers they might have around this priority.
Well, I feel this a little bit from you. It's definitely a way that I did it. It's a Julian original. I think when having that conversation, one thing that I think is really important, especially if your people are really opposed to the change, is just to tell them to give it a go. Right? Like if there's going to be a really negative impact, like if they think, oh, this is going to be terrible, our customers are going to hate this, it's going to be really difficult. That's actually okay. It's not the end of the world. Let's just do it for a little while, give it a red hot crack, go 100% at it for a week or two. And then if it doesn't work, we've actually got a lot of evidence, we've got a lot of data to go back and be like, hey, we've really given this a crack and it's not worked. Whereas if we only half-ass it, we don't sort of take it on and it doesn't work, the powers that be going to blame us. I think it's so much easier to roll that feedback up when we've done everything correctly. What do you think? I mean, that's actually what you think. I stole it from you. So
no,
you're right. You like it.
Yeah, you're right on the money. In terms of that one, sometimes it's just encouraging them to, jump off that cliff, so to speak, because what happens is that, and I think if you were to change minds, and the conversation I have with my people is, if you want to change that senior leader's mind or change, stakeholders' mind, the best way to do that is through evidence, right? Through data, through evidence. So how can you gather that data? You've got to give it a go. If you give it a go and it doesn't work out, we go, hey, we've had 100 instances that we've tried your particular thing that you wanted us to try, and 99 of them didn't work out, and these are the reasons it didn't work out. And so you can then start to change some of those minds around you. So I think having that conversation with your people as to how you can change minds instead of just going no straight away is going to be better for their branding as well. And to have that conversation around
100.
Branding is really key at this point.
Yeah, correct. And I think that's the other thing, like, take the change on, give it a red hot crack, whether it works or doesn't, that's not your responsibility. I say that to my people, like the success of this does not sit with you. You just have to give it a red hot go. If you give it 100% and you do your best, it'll make you look good whether it works or not, because you tried. And I think the more resistance you appear to have, the less the bosses are going to look to that person and think that they're, someone that they would look to promote. I think, especially if you're very career driven and very brand focused, and you want to look like the person that always just gives it a red hot crack.
And
the last thing I'll say on this.
You go.
Too late. I'm on the last thing. No, you can have the last thing after me. My last thing on this is, when you are rolling out the change, when you're doing that, make sure to keep it as simple as possible. I think I say this all the time, like no matter what it is, like the more barriers that get put between the action you want and the action we're currently doing, the less likely it is to happen. And I think that's always a conversation to have more upwards than downwards. Don't be afraid in a meeting if they're rolling out a change and you just can foresee that it's going to be a challenge, like it's going to be 2 or 3 extra steps for our people. Just make sure you pass that feedback on, because I think it's something that big bosses say, no, as long as everyone just does the right thing. If ever you find yourself, as long as everyone just does, no one is just going to do. No one ever just going to do. Everyone is always going to do the easier thing. It's just human nature. And so I think always just be really mindful of that when passing the feedback on upwards as well. Like, don't be afraid to say no. That's my thoughts.
No, 100%. That's a great point. The last thing, my last thing, Bill, okay?
The real last thing.
The real last thing is the last thing I want to say in regards to that is understanding in terms of those barriers, not being rigid with key performance indicators throughout this period. So the reason why I say this is, say that they're trying out a new thing, they're piloting a new thing, your people, right? And because of that, maybe some of the other stuff is going to slip a little bit, right? it is important to communicate to your people, hey, you're trying this new thing out. I'm fine if, maybe your AHT, blows out a little bit within reason, right? Set that expectation, what within reason looks like as well. Like, if it increases 10, 20%, man, that's par for the course. You're trying something new. It's all good, right? And telling them there's not going to be any repercussions if that happens, right? Because they're going to be pressurizing themselves, thinking, I'm trying this thing, this is going up, and that's going to end up snowballing into something worse. Also, communicating that up to your leader as well, going, hey, good, we're gonna do the things you asked us to do, all good. Now, one thing I want to let you know is that I'm going to tell my people that if we try this out, there's going to be a consequence to that. Are you okay with that too, right? And so that way you're taking those competing priorities, you're putting them together, but you're letting each person know along the line there's going to be some consequences out of it as well.
Yeah, I think that's a huge piece of the puzzle. And I think just to quickly add to this, if it's only one person making a change, like if you're in a coaching session, you've discussed something, I think when you post your results, call that out. Just be like, I can see that Julian's AHT's barely changed and they've been trying this new thing. I absolutely love it. Great work, mate. Keep it up in front of the team. Because a lot of the time, they're not actually necessarily worried about their AHT. They're worried about the team looking at their high AHT or whatever the KPI will be.
Yeah.
I think that is us for managing priorities, Jules. I think we've pretty much knocked everything through on our agenda. So I'll say this, if you out there, you enjoyed that video, if you got a lot from this one, please do like, subscribe, all that good stuff. It does us an absolute massive favor. And as always, if you've got anything you want us to flesh out more, anything you think we've missed, drop a comment and let us know.
Yeah, 100%. And tune in next week. Now that you know how to manage your people, manage your manager, you will find out how to excel through competing priorities, which is our next video. So look forward to that.